All right, everybody, we are going to get going with this afternoon's Smart Stage session. Thanks for joining us. Again, a reminder that the Smart Stage for the entire show for the next 2.5 days is sponsored by NICE North America, so we thank them for their sponsorship. I'm Jason Knott, editor of CE Pro, and I'm excited to be moderating this session, which is called The Prospects for Bringing Streaming to the CI Channel. And if any of you saw or heard even glimpses of what the keynote was this morning, or yesterday evening, I should say, from CEDIA, you know what's happening with the streaming media platforms and why this is going to become, and if it hasn't already, become an important element of your businesses. So I'm going to be moderating a panel discussion. Then we're going to have two different segments to today's discussion. First, we're going to have an overview of the streaming landscape, and in particular, live sports platforms. Then we're going to jump into a panel discussion with industry-leading executives that I'm going to moderate, and I'll introduce them in a few minutes. The panel is going to delve into some of the specific challenges and opportunities for the custom installation channel in bringing this streaming media platforms to their customers. So to kick it off, the first segment, I want to introduce Mark Feiner. Mark is the Managing Director of Communication Research and a longtime friend of mine, and he's going to be conducting a great interview with a very key executive. So Mark, take it away.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jason, for the introduction. So, we find ourselves in 2022 here at Expo in the midst of a very dynamic and changing industry. As Jason can attest to, and many of you have witnessed firsthand, this segment and channel has grown so dramatically over the past few decades, starting with the key solutions for audio-video installation and integration, and now addressing bountiful needs for the smart home of today. Everything from lighting, security, control, even HVAC and digital health is now coming to this channel. But our message today is a very important one. And I guess you could say we're here to make the case for entertainment content and why it's so important more than ever for the custom installation business. And to buttress and support this, ironically, I found a very interesting publication from my friend Jason at CE Pro. Last spring, they did a study with the integration channel about some of the key issues and opportunities facing this channel for growth going forth this year alone. And as you can see, it's spread among a number of categories. But a closer look will reveal that nearly half of these categories utilize audio, video, entertainment content. It's the mainstay and deliverable of these businesses. So if you look into that topic, what you're going to find today, as Jason referenced, was the importance of direct-to-consumer streaming and what's transpired in the last few years in the marketplace. And I wish I could say this was organic and it came out of the industry as a whole, but I would be remiss because the true company who drove this almost single-handedly was Netflix. If you consider Netflix value proposition, 15 years ago, they pivoted from packaged media on DVD to being one of the first companies to offer video streaming. And in doing so, they redefined and created a paradigm shift in everything. From the way content is produced, they became not just a distributor, but a studio, to the way it's distributed on a variety of devices for viewing anytime and anywhere, and ultimately how it's consumed. Netflix is ultimately a consumer lifestyle company, and everybody today has their own versions of the Netflix experience. But perhaps best of all, they spawned a host of imitators. And this list of direct-to-consumer companies, whether they be multi-video distributors, specialty companies, even today, actually late yesterday, Verizon announced they're going to have yet another SVOD service, and that will be coming out later this year. All of these services together have created an exciting and very dynamic marketplace. But I want to take us away from our business and talk a little bit more about it from the end user's perspective. What's happened is these platforms have spun off a variety of different business models. And if you look at these acronyms, I challenge anyone to be able to exactly define each and every one. Some are ad-supported, some are transactional, some of them are premium-based, and others are still evolving as we speak today. But what's happened in the last few months is remarkable. Nielsen, A.E. Nielsen, the survey company, did a study, and in July of this year, consumer streaming became the #1 video viewing platform in this country, exceeding pay TV cable, satellite, even over the air, as far as eyeballs and ears were concerned. And so, this is where we sit today. But what I want to speak to now is about understanding your customers, what the end user is going through with all of this. And my organization that I represent, the Digital Entertainment Group, is like many of them. They've done surveys and research on consumers' predisposition towards streaming. And these are some of the key takeaways that we've seen. First and foremost, all of these SVOD businesses are driving the current market. And as I mentioned a moment ago, they continue to evolve. There's also major platforms that are dominating this with incredible market share. And yet, despite that, there's awareness of these specialty services, what I'm referring to, PBS, BBC, and other more targeted services, because the streaming customer is maturing in what they need and what they want. There's also clear indication that even though ad-free content services are becoming more prevalent, streamers will pay more for an advertising-free experience. And there's growing concerns about cost of bundling all these services, since the research is showing that the average home only has 3 to 4 services at best. And finally, of course, choice is leading very quickly to confusion. And confusion is leading to higher disconnect rates, what we call in the industry churn rates. And all of that is very, very difficult for these platforms to address. And against this backdrop, we now face potentially the most exciting opportunity of all. And that is bringing live sports viewing into the streaming space. Over the last few months, a number of these companies, whether they be platforms by sports broadcasters or even the leagues themselves, are entering this category. And they're looking at this as an opportunity to bring a powerful message to sports fans and enthusiasts everywhere. Powerful platforms. They're spending millions of dollars investing in these platforms to deliver a superior audio and video experience. Powerful brands that are known by sports fans everywhere. And these brands resonate with consumers here and globally. And most importantly, very powerful content. The content that's necessary to create, hopefully, another paradigm shift for sports, just like Netflix created for episodic television and movies. So, what are the prospects for live sports streaming? Well, rather than stand here and pretend that I can answer the whole backstory on this, we brought with us a very special guest today, who's joining us all the way from Hawaii. Ken Agard is the former Executive Vice President of Operation and Productions for CBS Sports. And during his long career, he's worked on a number of other sports organizations, including ABC, NBC, ESPN, Fox Sports, and the Major League Baseball Network. And Ken's amazing resume includes responsibilities for, listen to this, 20 Super Bowls, 21 Master Tournaments, 21 PGA Championships, 14 US Opens, 5 World Series, 5 Daytona 500s, 3 Olympics, 3 World Cups, a half a dozen Wimbledons and French Opens mixed in, and a number of other boxing, soccer, and other types of events, including golf. Suffice to say, Ken is a member of the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame and serves today as their chairman, as well as the founder and chairman emeritus of the Sports Video Group. So please welcome, via Zoom, Ken Agard. Hi, Ken.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Good. I'm enjoying the backdrop that you seem to have there in Hawaii, a little different than what we're experiencing here today in Dallas, but I'm glad you can make the time for us, and I was hoping you could enlighten our audience with a few key answers to some questions I have. So I wanted to start with just a little reflection on your part, very briefly. Given your long career, how have you seen sport broadcasting technology transition from standard def to high def to 4K HDR and now to streaming? And can you give us some brief experiences you've had personally with this?
The interesting thing about all these formats is they really didn't happen overnight. A lot of us think, oh, poof, there's high def. Didn't really happen that way. The first time I ever saw high definition was in the 1984 Olympics in LA, when NHK, one of the Tokyo broadcasters, had an HD analog camera then, high in the Coliseum at midfield, just as an experiment. But it wasn't until 1998 that at the network level, when I was at CBS, we produced 4 NFL Jet games for the first time that aired on network broadcast.
Right.
I mean, and HD had been done at lower levels, but now at the network level, and we produced these as side-by-side broadcasts, separate announcers, separate crews, separate cameras. Now we're going into HDR and 4K and a different kind of formats, which always continue to evolve, and it's still basically in progress. I mean, the first HDR that we did at CBS was in the Masters in 2014, but HDR is now starting to come out as a standard, and all through this, OT&T streaming has really been ongoing now for basically a lot of years. But part of the problem is the formats are all over the place. Right. And to be able to make all this happen, we needed a lot of technical innovation along the way. From cameras, I'm talking about on the remote side, from cameras to graphics, to everything that we need to be able to produce a show.
So Ken, using that as a backdrop, specifically in terms of live sports streaming, what are the challenges your colleagues on the broadcast and distribution side face, do you think, that are most important to address?
It's a combination of everything. It's not just the streaming. And frankly, that's part of the problem, because we, from the site where we're producing the game, all the way to the end user, there's so many differences of formats that go through this. The affiliates for the broadcast networks really are, their first line of broadcast, and they're not even capable of doing HDR, as an example, at this time. And when we first started doing high def, that was one of the issues, was getting our high def signals to the affiliates and then getting that out to the consumer themselves. And then along with that comes all kinds of different video compression schemes. Right. Each of the broadcasters don't use the same streams. And the one thing we can't forget is audio. Now is we went from mono to stereo to 5.1 to surround. Now there's a multiple availability of a lot of audio channels to each of us in the sports world, which is great. The problem is the standards aren't the same from broadcaster to broadcaster. You can have, as an example, international audio on channels 1 and 2, and announcers on 3 and 4, and channel 5, 6, and 7, different languages or different isolated feeds, coaches' mics, or whatever. And now that's one other variable you have to bring in. And then we're doing HDR feeds, but we still have to down convert to SDR to deliver it to some of the consumers. And then on top of that, now with especially the larger events, we're doing multiple streams simultaneous with a linear broadcast. As an example, PGA Tour is one of my clients these days, and where they're actually producing 4 feeds for ESPN on every single tournament. Follow the Groove, signature holes, and par threes.
So Ken, with all this in mind, our audience is primarily involved with trying to optimize the experience of watching and listening to movies and episodic TV. If you were to cite what are the key factors different for live sports production, what would you say is the most important point as a takeaway for everyone here today?
Well, look, it's critical that all the variables with live sports production have to be coordinated at all times. And the one thing that is the biggest difference in live sports is we have one chance to get it right.
Right.
So all those elements that I just referred to earlier, they all have to work. On top of that, in live sports, backups, as an example, are not optional. They're a requirement.
Right.
Murphy's Law, equipment fails, operators make mistakes. I'll give you it happens at low levels, it happens at big levels. But I'll go back to, I was in the truck in 2013 in New Orleans, and the power goes. And it was right at the beginning of the third quarter. I wasn't even sure what happened when it first happened. The good news is we kept all of our power in the TV compound because we were all on generators. We backed ourselves up. But in the announce booth, for whatever reason, someone pulled the UPS, and I didn't have Jim Nantz and Phil Simms. So we ended up having to work with announcers on the field to be able to continue commentary, because those were even the only cameras that were on copper and had power at the time. So, it's all of those are the kinds of things that, I'm continually worried about when we're doing a live sports production.
So Ken, I have one last question for you, and from the audience perspective, once again, these dealers and integrators deal with consumers, their clients. What would you say is the biggest challenge you see from their perspective when it comes to the end user experience in live sports viewing?
Well, as it relates to people that are this show, I think perhaps one of the biggest challenges for we sports broadcasters is we don't actually know what the end user is seeing and getting at home. Through the various formats and all these other reasons that I'm talking about, we're not sure what's happening. And I'll give you one good example going back to my NFL days at CBS when I'd sit in the broadcast center in New York every Sunday monitoring games. And when we went from stereo to 5.1 audio, suddenly I kept hearing the complaint desk telling me people are calling in, they can't hear the announcers. All they can hear is the effects. This went on, and it was such a big problem. I would actually have them call me, and then I'd call the individual in Minnesota or Indiana and Florida, and I'd say to them, first thing I'd say to them, I said, do you have another set in the house? Because they'd be upset. I can't hear the announcer. And I said, well, go turn it on. They turn it on. They almost every time come back and say, oh, yeah, I hear fine. I said, well, the problem this was when all of the set manufacturers were going to the new monitors. They all had different audio menus. The consumer didn't know how to set it up right. And I'd tell them, I said, look, go into your audio menu. Every set is going to be a little bit different. Check whatever settings you have. And sure enough, I'd say to them on the phone, and they'd get it fixed, and suddenly they hear the announcements. But unfortunately, you can't call every single consumer to get this fixed. So it's really kind of essential that all the dealers and integrators really kind of give it their best effort in calibrating, all these connected devices so that we can get all of these things right. We got a lot of work to do.
Well, Ken, hopefully with your support and with more knowledge and education, the dealers and integrators in this channel can make a difference and improve that user experience. So please join me in thanking Ken for a great presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. So, Jason, I'll get out of your way.
Working? Can you hear me? I'll use this one again. Let me have the panel come on up. Thank you very much for that, Mark. That was very interesting. Now we're going to kind of really try and pinpoint it specifically for integrators here, if we can, with some of the industry key executives. With me today are Tom Doherty, Director of New Technology Initiatives at HTSA, and Andy Orozco, Senior Vice President of Custom Integration Nationwide Marketing Group, joining Mark on the panel. So, all right, we just heard what Ken Agard was saying about what's going on from the quality streaming standpoint. Can you guys hear me okay? Can everybody hear me?
Check.
Hello? Testing? Yeah, we're on.
On.
Testing this one. Can you hear me? Okay, that one works. All right. Let me sit over here with you guys. That'll feel like Dick Cavett now. Aging myself with that comment. All right. So we just heard from Ken talking about underscoring the importance of highest quality streaming for live sports fans. What types of value-added benefits in this area can CI integrators bring to their customers? Mark, I'll let you address that first.
Sure. I think this channel is so involved as a matter of their business on a day-to-day basis with the highest quality experience that it's only a question of how can we work with content providers to enhance and optimize what their clients are experiencing. Now that's easy to say, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of coordination to do so. But I think that's one of the reasons why we're here at Expo this year, to talk about an approach that could benefit your members as buying groups, as well as the dealers and installers as large.
Yeah. All right, so let me move to Tom and Andy of this question. I think it's going to be interesting. Basically what we're talking about here, folks, is how can an integrator create a seamless experience for their customer to find all the sports programming, and let alone all the programming that Mark was showing earlier. Think about how many different streaming services the NFL is on just alone. Just this last week or 2 weeks ago, they were having all sorts of problems with that first Amazon Prime game, if you read the newspapers. So, or newspapers. I'm really dating myself, aren't I? Yeah. All right. So, let's talk about what can the buying groups and CEDIA in general do to kind of help push this forward? How can we bring this channel to the attention of Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube TV, all of these streaming providers, the NFL Network, or whoever it might be? Is there a way that we can get in front of these, or are we just too small of a channel?
I absolutely think there's a way, and what Mark is, with his contacts with these various providers, just having this event here and it being recorded, these providers are going to hear that this discussion is happening, and what's required is a coalition of the groups and CEDIA, the organization, to be visible to these people. And I believe that it's just a matter of having meetings and discussions, because it's in their interest for their consumers to have the very best experience. And technology is so complicated, it really requires a professional to make these things happen. And I think that these providers just aren't really aware or have visibility that we are an amazing tool for them. And I look forward to the work that Mark and this event is helping to get that message out.
and not just an amazing channel, but an amazing channel who has amazing customers who don't churn, people who are willing to pay top dollar to have every streaming service in their home if they can. And you know, some of the companies have figured that out, but most of them haven't. So Andy, do you see a way, do you see that at some point we might be looking out here at CEDIAExpo and see booths from Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube TV, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. But I think Tom hit on something that's really important, is that individually it's very difficult, but if we do it together, it's a big audience. Just think about the number of integrators that are in the country today, well over 10,000. So again, I think doing it in a unified manner, I think will definitely get us on the radar. And I think one day you will see those companies out here on the floor.
So Mark, you've had discussions through Digital Entertainment Group with some of these streaming providers about this channel. What has been their reaction to this channel?
Now, we have, Jason, and again, to put this into context, the first wave of streaming platforms has come and gone. They're in the market, they're entrenched. I'm talking the multiple video distribution providers, the Netflix, Hulu's, and Prime Videos. With sports, though, it's a whole new opportunity. And to put this in the context about the NFL and Prime Video, when they launched their service almost 2 weeks ago on Thursday night, they deployed roughly 1,000 people, give and take, in their call centers, expecting reactions,
I thought
questions,
one was up there.
potential problems from end users, because they don't have the wherewithal to reach out to their customers directly. And what I mentioned before, when we spoke with these sports platforms, they are very open to the opportunity to collaborate, providing we can make a compelling case for the CI channel and the relationship that your groups and others have with your customers as trusted advisors. That's the type of synergy we're going to try to achieve on this.
So Ken was describing, I thought was fascinating, because I have to admit, I watch those Masters feeds, you know, the Amen Corner, particular groups, all those sorts of things. I watch that. How can an integrator create something like that for his customer through his? I'm watching it on my PC. I'm not watching it on TV. So what's the way for an integrator to kind of coalesce all of these Masters feeds, NFL feeds, etc., into a seamless experience where they don't? Let's face it, a customer doesn't even know what streaming platform a game is on any particular night. They don't know. They need to find it. How
Yeah.
can it be done?
I saw maybe like a month ago, you had an article that you wrote. You talked to Steve Weber, right?
Yeah.
It's constant concierge concept. I think it's education. There's a lot of education. There's so many different platforms that are out there, right? And being able to guide a consumer to qualify a consumer and guide them to what it is that they're looking for. And then ultimately, our channel is going to provide the best experience. You got to have a good backbone, good network. The display device has got to be, really robust as well.
Tom, let me ask you a question. Is it feasible for there to be some sort of a certification program that's put together by the buying groups or CEDIA as the organization to certify integrators as streaming content concierge providers or something like that?
I do, but I think it would be CEDIA is the player to play that role, and they would have the support. CEDIA would have the support of all the groups. I think that's how that happens. Or if it's not CEDIA, clearly there's a need for a third party. I don't know who that would be to step forward. You know, we used to have a TV Guide, and TV Guide used to be the #1 publication on the planet. And it was where you found everything. And nowadays with, I'm on this cable system and my neighbor's on that cable system, it's difficult. So I'm wondering out loud, CDDB and GraceNote brought together all this metadata. I don't know why we don't have a company that has come up with a standard that all these other companies can feed into, and we can have that kind of app, because that's what we want, that's what we need.
So let me put Tom's point into context of how these companies are structured. These platforms have spent hundreds of millions of dollars putting their services online. And they're concerned, of course, in making certain that the product they deliver is not only a quality experience, but a profitable one. But in doing so, they tend to sometimes forget that at the end of the day, particularly with sports fans, it's all about the passion and the connection to the sports experience. When we raise this issue with these various broadcast and league platforms, frankly speaking, they all acknowledge that their own families and friends were as confused about where to find their favorite game on a given date, on a given time, because it's not just from streaming, but many of these sports are still available live over the air or from pay TV and other sources. So putting together some type of overlay that explains this, whether it's a website, whether it's an app, and getting this integrated into sports fans on whatever device they're accessing their sports on, would be one of the key deliverables we would like to focus on to do this.
All right, here's the big question. What's the business model? Is this integrators? If an integrator is a reseller of these services, are they marking up the service? Are they a authorized dealer and then they're getting some sort of a kickback based on the number of subscribers they bring? What's the business model for an integrator? Obviously, they're helping out Netflix, they're helping out all the streaming services, but how does that integrator make money in this situation? Tom?
That's the $64,000 question, and I think that answer only reveals itself when you can bring the parties together. You know, with the various buying groups, to the extent CEDIA can be sitting in the room with these executives, and we all recognize that we have a common, there's a commonality amongst what we're trying to achieve, then the money part can be figured out. I think it'd be foolish for me to say, well, here's how that would work. But I know the next step is to have these providers, these content providers, these streaming services understand and have awareness that this industry exists and that we are, you know, the last mile or the last 50 feet or we are the connection to their clients. And at the high end that we primarily serve, that's where innovation first occurs, and we're right there in it, and they can learn a lot from us, and we would benefit from kind of understanding, things that Ken were telling me. I didn't really consider all that. So there needs to be a dialogue, and then we can figure it out.
Andy?
Yeah, I think the providers need to understand that ultimately, if the end user is not having a good experience, if the feed is choppy or the video quality is bad or the sound is bad, that's bad for them. So we again offer the best opportunity to provide the experience exactly the way that it was intended to be. Much like a director, when they do a movie, they want you to experience it in a certain way. And I think this is the crowd. This is the venue to make that happen.
Right. Now, I agree with what Tom and Andy are saying, but additionally, I think it's important that this channel, the dealers, integrators, the buying groups, the CEDIA organization, put a value on this content benefit and support that the channel can provide. If we look at the numbers in the research, the people who are spending the most on home integration, entertainment, and installation are the biggest purchasers of entertainment content. And we have found in the research they will pay extra for this type of information, for this type of guidance, because after all, that's the end game. They're buying this equipment so they can enjoy this content to the fullest. And that said, Tom is correct. Andy, it's the same. We know there's some discussions that have to take place, but there's also value adds, Jason, that the platforms can provide, whether it's incentives in promoting their services or special bundles or sizzle reels of content. These reels can be used to demonstrate when you're installing and integrating these products. They can bring that value to this relationship, which helps everybody. Their service to get more subscribers and retain them, and the dealers and your members to make more profit.
we might have just found the formula for finally nationally advertising this channel to somebody. You know, the one thing that I'm fearful, and maybe I'm off base, is you don't want to have you have cable providers consistently. You find they drop channels because they, the provider was charging them too much. You know, Dish will drop a channel. They don't carry this anymore because they're in a negotiation war with somebody. We don't want integrators to get caught in that game, you know. So, I'm just throwing that out. Is that a potential?
It's valid to some degree, but here's the real difference. In the traditional pay TV days of strictly cable, satellite, and fiber distribution, you were contractually bound to honor your agreements for when you signed up for them. In the days of on-demand, which we're in now, people sign up, people drop, people come back. It depends on what is driving and motivating them, and most of it is event-driven. Even the big powerhouse platforms, the Netflix of the world, they see their subscriber base wane, comes back when there's a big, powerful event and show, and goes off again to those who are not as interested, because people only have a limited amount of time to spend when it comes to streaming for content. So the penalty, if there is one, isn't the same as it was for cable and satellite, and I don't think that would be an issue from the standpoint of the buying groups and dealers. I think more importantly is what they just raised a moment ago, how to explain and demonstrate the value you offer to the platforms and the services, because they're largely unfamiliar with this organization called CEDIA, the buying groups, and even this specialty part of the business. So we have to herd the cats, bring them together, and create new relationships to do so.
Well, I know, Mark, you're moving on that forefront. You've been in touch with CEDIA. You're working with the buying groups. I could see a coalition of this industry kind of pulling together, going to NAB or wherever it might be to try and meet with these individuals and have this conversation and bring the channel to the forefront. I want to leave time for any questions. I should have mentioned early on, we have a microphone up here. If anybody has any questions for the panel, I should have mentioned that earlier.
Everyone but Henry, we're going to skip over it.
Yeah. All right, we have run over time. I want to thank you. I thought it was fantastic to hear from Ken Agard, from Tom, and from Mark, and from Andy. If I could get a round of applause, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.